But I am wondering if you are building a team, and I know you said that, and it wasn't a cop out. Like, you're right, the versatility matters more. But would you rather have the setup and flesh out your roster from there? And I'm talking specifically 2 stars. And I know there are other I'm looking at 3 separate combinations here. You have what you have going on in Dallas, where it's a bigger floor general, and then with Kyrie Irving is just this this elite second star who's just an offensive wizard. Or you have Boston with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, super versatile. Both play like you want those wing spots, those to be moved around on defense, and then they can generate their own shots. And Jason Tatum is, what is he, like a B minus, a B playmaker, which, like, to say above average for what he's supposed to be. Or you then kind of have, I would call it like, there's Denver with Jamal Murray and Jokic, or there's the Lakers with LeBron, kind of a bigger floor general, and Anthony Davis, like the elite big man. So kind of throwing out who's super versatile on defense and he's more of a play finisher on offense. If you kind of had to pick you're starting your NBA franchise, and forget about the age. I know LeBron's older, but like, forget about the ages. Just look at sort of the archetypal setups here. If you had your druthers of the 2 stars that you want to have them and then work your way from there, what makes the most sense from that perspective? I'm only asking you this because the thing with the 3-star combination is that even if you're only signing minimums, in theory, it does give you more of a margin for error, where necessarily maybe the archetypes don't matter as much if you know they're all going to be healthy and they're all X good. Like, it still matters, but the thing with 3 stars is that you are invariably, in most cases, going to overload on something, and you just hope that something is so much better than your weaknesses, or more pronounced than your weaknesses, that you're able to outstrip it. So if you're looking at, okay, I'm putting together a team, I get to flesh out my 2-star prototypes from there. How are you, like, what is your preference, or what do you think is the most efficient way to build out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would lean toward the bigger playmaker, if only because of the challenges that presents for opposing defenses. Like, I mean, Luka has shown, especially in this series, like, Minnesota had the best defense during the regular season, just gave Denver a ton of trouble, and Luka is just destroying them. They have no good answer for him.
Mm.
So, Luka is obviously one of one. You can't just say Luka Doncic, like, you can't look at like a Cade Cunningham and say he's also a bigger playmaker, so he's definitely going to turn into the next Luka Doncic. Or like LaMelo Ball is a bigger
Right.
playmaker, so he's definitely going to turn into the next Luka Doncic. But I do think those guys present some matchup difficulties just because of their size, and you can't stick a traditional point guard on them. So, especially if they are your primary guard and you don't have Kyrie next to you where you could hide a point guard, like, where do you even park your point guard defensively? I think that's going to be a challenge for teams that run into, if whenever Cade goes to the playoffs or LaMelo goes to the playoffs. Like, I'm interested to see what sort of challenges that presents for the opposing teams, although Detroit has Jaden Ivey for the time being, so maybe that won't be an issue. So I think I would lean that way. But again, I just would go back to, like, I don't think, like, I never would have thought Dallas, especially prior to the trade deadline, never in a million years would have thought they would be 1 year or 1 game away from the finals. And
Right.
even after the trade deadline,
Yeah.
I mean, they were one of the best teams in the NBA in, like, March, I think, right? They went like 16-4 at one point, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And even still, it's just, well, this is March, it's noisy. Like, how much can we read into this? Like, their defense was incredible, which, as it turned out, was exactly what was going to happen in the playoffs. But I think a lot of people at the time, myself probably included, we just figured it's late season NBA. How much can we really read into this? So, I think it goes to show, like, Dallas is the perfect example of, like, this is not even a traditional 2-star build where you have 2 stars and they both are guards effectively, and you I don't want to say cheap out, but you went for inexpensive wings and inexpensive centers from a salary perspective. And just because those two are such good playmakers, Luka in particular, like, you don't need your center to be a shot creator when Luka Doncic can throw you a game clinching lob like he did with Daniel Gafford in Game 3 against Minnesota. But no, it fundamentally comes down to who you have to I think you just basically need to tell your roster around who is your number one guy, what is that guy's ceiling. For Dallas, Luka's ceiling is MVP. Luka's ceiling is best player in the NBA. Like even Minnesota, same way with Anthony Edwards, and I think they're going to be a really interesting one to follow because you could argue that they are not really built to maximize him right now. Like
Mhm.
they are built in a way that again led to almost unprecedented success for them. But I would not be shocked if 2 years from now this Minnesota roster looks a lot different than what it does right now because it has become clear that this is Anthony Edwards' team. It is not Karl Anthony Towns' team anymore.
I think I agree that I would probably prefer, and I wouldn't have said this before or after the trade deadline either, and maybe it's sort of prisoner of the moment type thing, but Dallas's setup seems like it's the best way to build out because of how much of a premium what Luka and Kyrie do are
Mm-hmm.
in the postseason when you're going up against elite defenses. And even just the I might have picked Jokic and Murray before the start of the playoffs, but like we kind of Murray's been inconsistent even before he was injured. Like that's just a thing that's been ingrained into his entire career. And you sort of need that like 360-degree scoring where it's like Jokic can pass and score in a lot of different ways, but like sort of that face up from the perimeter, try and beat guys off the dribble or take like the contested jumper falling away. That's not what he does. And I think you need that player. And when you have two of those players, I think it gives your team a higher ceiling than maybe looking at all of your parts on paper implies. Where it's like the sum of everything Dallas is doing right now makes so much sense that maybe it is outstripping relative to talent. I mean, but like, so it's like the proof is kind of just in what they're doing. But if you would have asked me this question before the trade deadline, and that's why I'm like, am I like I might have just for years might have been like, no, it's the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum setup. Like, I'll figure out how
Yeah.
to plug in the playmaking, but like, give me the guys who are going to give you borderline elite play at both ends of the court, and also being able to generate their own shot from multiple levels. And I think that Dallas is honestly, especially in the age of this new CBA, where I'm looking at it through the lens of like, I don't think teams are going to, unless they're homegrown or two of them are homegrown and you go out and get another one, sort of like if OKC had J Dub and Chet and then like they went out and traded for Shea type deal. I'm
Mm.
looking at it through the lens of having two superstars is going to become the new norm. And Dallas is like swaying the ever living shit out of me just based off what and it's like you look at it and yeah, okay, no Kawhi in round one, but like they're beating real teams to like get like
Yeah.
their path to the finals is not easy by any respect, especially compared to what Boston's going through. And no road to the finals is easy. I want to make that clear. Beat the team in front of you, but like and they're doing it. I don't even know if this shows like the importance of the trade deadline too. Whereas maybe acquiring James Harden at the trade deadline that doesn't swing your championship odds because it's such a massive piece that you have to
Mm-hmm.
integrate, and that is better served in the offseason. But they get glue guys, role player guys, no one who is expected to be more than the third best player on their roster at the trade deadline, and it kind of swings them in this like it becomes a series of swing moves for them. And so again, maybe I'm just getting caught up in the moment here, but I look at that and I'm like, there's a level of duh because Luka is one of one. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
even stepping aside from that, like if you just gave like Donovan Mitchell like another 4 inches or something, like I might prefer like the Darius Garland Donovan Mitchell setup then because we're not talking about elite defenders at this point, but it does get higher. It gets easier to hide them positionally on defense if they are bigger. And I don't know if that just shows how weak-minded I am and how easily swayed I am, or if it's just a testament to what Dallas has built. But I'm looking at it through that lens now, and I'm like, I think it's them for me. I'd rather work my way back or work my way out from those two archetypes than even like a LeBron AD. Again, throw the ages out. Feels like it might have the most balance when you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it from the perspective of if we're building the two-star models, and then Boston's is the most versatile. And I'm just looking at the premium that Kyrie and Luka give on offense, especially because of Luka's size as part of that. And I'm like, I think that's the one for me right now. I know you said there's no one formula. I think that was important, but I threw you on the spot ananyway because I thought it was just an interesting discussion. It's like, what would be the preference if you're trying to just
Yeah.
start from scratch type deal?
Well, it's interesting too because that's you mentioned like you would prefer the Boston model, and that's the gamble that the Clippers took in 2019. Like that was their exact vision with Kawhi and Paul George. Is like these guys are elite, two-way, both good shooters, both have some playmaking in them as well. Like we think that they are going to be able to kind of do what has happened in Boston over the last couple of years, and Unfortunately for them, it's just been Kawhi's health. It's been the one major roadblock in their way this entire tenure. But I mean, there have been times where the Clippers look like world beaters. For half of this season, they look like one of the best teams in the NBA, and then for half of it, they look like one of the worst.